What's going on, YouTube? I sit here before you all, sharing some sad news once again. Yesterday, my father's mother, my grandmother, passed away at the age of 87 years old. And instead of making a video being sad, I really want to celebrate her life and celebrate the historical figure of a woman that she was. My grandmother was born and raised in Mississippi, deep South, during like extreme segregation, extreme racial tension between Black and white Americans. Uh, she was lived a lot of her life in Vicksburg, Mississippi, and Lorman, Mississippi, near Alcorn State University, which is the institution, which is the college the university that she attended, as well as her sisters. My grandmother was the daughter of educators. Her father was a teacher, and her mother was a teacher as well. Her father eventually became a principal of an elementary school, and that led my grandmother to get into the field of education as well eventually, and her sisters as well. My grandmother was the oldest of six children. She met my grandfather young, and they married and settled in Waynesboro, Mississippi. Waynesboro is near the Alabama state line in Mississippi. So, they lived together. They had children. They had three boys and one girl. And eventually, my grandfather was like, "Look, this ain't enough money here." He was a carpenter, really good with his hands. He was able to make things happen with his hands, and he was able to build things. So he like, "Look, it's better opportunity up north. We can't really make a good living here in the South." So eventually he moved to Chicago, Illinois, where I am now. They moved in the 60s. When they moved here, a better life came, and their horizons, like they just broadened their horizons all across the board, and a lot of things got a lot better for them. When my grandmother and them came to Chicago, the neighborhood that they live in now was not. It was Black people there, but like the surrounding areas, it wasn't a lot of Black people there. My grandfather worked so hard when he got to Chicago that him and my grandmother and my grandfather both worked so hard when they got to Chicago that he was able to get a house built from the ground up for our family on the south side of Chicago. So they eventually moved, and my grandmother's been living where she's been living since the 1960s. Everybody know my grandmother. When I tell y'all my grandmother's walking history, my grandmother, she marched on Washington with Martin Luther King Jr. She went to Dr. Martin Luther King's funeral. My grandmother, like I said, she was around. She lived through segregation in the Deep South, where you couldn't go to restaurants here. You couldn't go to the bathroom. Black people had to go to separate bathrooms. Black people couldn't drink from this water fountain. She remembered that, and she would tell me a lot of times her father wouldn't even let them go and use go to experience the separated bathrooms. They would use the bathroom on the side of the road if they was in a car a lot of times, because he didn't even want them to have an experience that to be degraded as if you were less than by saying you're not good enough to use this bathroom. My grandmother, man, I'm gonna tell you, this woman was so amazing, so loving, so caring, and just a helpful. It was just all like she would help anybody in need. Any person in need she saw, she would help them. I remember this, and me being so young, I remember watching when Barack Obama became president of the United States of America. This was 2008. 2008, I was a freshman he became president. I was a freshman in high school, either a freshman or sophomore. Was it myself? No, I was a freshman in high school, and I saw my grandmother crying tears like a baby. And I'm like, "You're okay, you okay?" I'm like, "You crying?" And she just was so amazed because she thought in her lifetime she would never, ever see a Black man become president of the United States. She thought that would never happen in a million years. And for her to see that, she saw everything happen. Times change. She saw the good, the bad change to better. She saw all different type of changes happen in the United States of America, and Black people evolve. And that's always something that she wanted for us to be educated, to rise above a lot of circumstances that was around us. So she really harped on education for a lot of my family. And because again, she's the daughter of educators. She also was a teacher as well as a bank teller. She worked in a bank, and she was a teacher. Her being a teacher at a school that I went to, Turner Drew Language Academy in Princeton Park on 93rd and Princeton in Chicago. That is how that school came on my parents' radar, and they sent me to that school where I learned Russian. I learned French, and I was just learning just a lot. Like I learned how to type without looking down in the third grade. It helped me become like her being at that school opened better doors of opportunity as far as education for me and my siblings and my cousins and everybody else. When I say my grandmother's walking history, man, all the things that she's experienced in life. Like my family had land in Mississippi. She's experienced so much and lived through everything. Again, everything you could think of, she saw. And like when my grandmother was getting older, things started to hit me. But I'm just so happy. I'm talking so proudly about her. I'm sounding so uplifted because to me, my grandmother was in a lot of pain, and she lived a long life. 87 years old is a long life. But I was just, a part of us, we become selfish. We never want we always want our people to be here for as long as possible. We never want them to leave ever, ever, ever. And I'm not going to lie, I was one of the people that thought my grandmother would live to be like 110 years old because she's been through so many different health problems, y'all. Like when I was in college, she was having all type of health problems a lot of times. She would go in and out of the hospital, but come right back home and be watching her Wheel of Fortune, watching her soap operas. She would be right in front of the TV watching Wheel of Fortune and watch the news in the morning, in the evening, and at night. She would watch the news 3 times a day and have her curtains drawn and be sitting in her rocking chair and looking out the window and just watching the neighborhood and watching her TV, doing her crossword puzzles and just loving life. And she lived a great life. So that's what really is giving me peace right now at this moment, knowing my grandmother lived a long, fruitful life and a great life. She was able to see her grandchildren, great-grandchildren. She was able to see all those things. And like, again, I remember when I was in school, she would always get sick, but she would always get better. I'm like, my grandmother's a fighter. And I'm going to share some information with y'all. Like my grandmother outlived 2 of her sons and 2 of her grandchildren and her husband. She outlived her husband. My grandfather never lived to be 50 years old. 2 of her sons did not live to be 50 years old. They died in their late 40s from heart issues, health issues, right? My brother was murdered, and my cousin, her grandchild, died of a health issue. My cousin, she died of a health issue as well. So my grandmother outlived all of them, and she's been through so much and experienced so much pain and loss in her life, and to still be kicking and smiling every single day, even when she wasn't feeling the best. That was something that made me go on and say, you know what? If my grandmother not feeling the best and she still got a smile on her face, still ready to go, it always did something to me. And as my grandmother got older, I remember, it's crazy. We all go through stages in life, right? We start off as infants. We become teenagers. We become adults. We become we get up in age. I don't know what that level is called, but we become parents, become grandparents, and then you become a senior, right? And as my grandmother was getting into her 80s, I started to see her revert back to like a childlike form. She still had all her faculties. She could talk with you and everything, but she would be asleep and be cold and be bundled up. And sometimes we had bought her a teddy bear. She'd curl up with the teddy bear. And I was like, wow, my grandmother is really getting older. She's getting older, and like she started needing help going to the bathroom. She started needing help walking down the stairs sometimes. At times. A lot of times she'd do it by herself, but at times she would need help. She would need help with a lot of certain other things around the household, including washing clothes. And so I was like, wow, my grandmother is really getting older. I got to cherish these moments with her as time goes on. I remember when I went to college, and my grandmother used to always tell my father, I hope I live long enough to see Malcolm graduate from college. Hope I live long enough to see him graduate from college. And she saw me graduate from college twice. She saw me get my bachelor's degree, and she also saw me get my master's degree. And I was just so happy for that. And she was so happy and proud of me. And she always been proud of all of us, man. Our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, always been proud of all of us. And always supported us, man. At every graduation we had, every graduation I had, she was there all the time, front and center with her little church hat on. She'd be coming in her wheelchair, her church hat on, and she'd be dressed down. Like, I mean, she'd be dressed to the nines, killing it. But like for real, the last time I saw my grandmother, she was in a hospital, and I came in, she kissed me on the cheek, and she was just talking. She was just so happy to see me. And like I say, I'm definitely gonna miss her. But my grandmother is like when she moved to Chicago, the neighborhood she was living in, it was black people there. But like I said, it was surrounded in the area. It was a lot of white people. So they was like some of the like a prominent. They worked from the bottom. They didn't have a lot of money. I still wasn't rich, but they did well for themselves. Was not rich at all, but did well for themselves. And to be able to move into a home and all of those things and experience that type of life and to get better for their children compared to what they did in Mississippi. My grandmother used to tell me about them hunting rabbits and hunting rabbits to eat for dinner. My grandfather was a good shot. He'd go and shoot rabbits and bring them home to cook them to feed his kids. And I was like, wow, like that is some stuff that I've never will experience in my life, more than likely. You know what I mean? But he did it. And my grandmother would go and she cooked the rabbits. She skin them and cook them, and she cook them with them. And my grandmother used to love, she would wash all our clothes, and we was kids. She just loved washing our clothes. I started washing my own clothes at like 12, with my mom and stuff. But she loved washing our clothes and, and taking us to Mississippi to see certain parts of our family and telling us about all the family history and sitting me down and talking to me about, where she used to live and how she grew up and how things was completely different in Mississippi and how when she came to Chicago, she felt like she was on top of the world because they just came from nothing, and don't get me wrong, like we had me and my mama, we did not have it. Me and my mama didn't have it excellent growing up at all. You know what I mean? But we were better off than a lot of other people. We had our heat and stuff off at times and all of that in Chicago. But it was a lot of people that were living in homeless shelters. And I thank God that we was never in shelters or anything like that at all. But my grandmother and them came from the bottom and came to Chicago and found a good life to live for their kids. And then eventually to pass the grandchildren, great grandchildren, things of that, and things of that nature. But yeah, man, my grandma always gonna be in my heart, man. Amazing woman. Like when she was getting older, man, she would love for us to sing happy birthday to her all the time. We get her a cake, we be over there eating dinner with her, singing happy birthday, and she just be smiling and cheesing and grinning. I promise y'all, if I find that video, I'm going to find a video of my grandma. I'm going to put it up on my YouTube channel. It's going to be grainy because it's old, but a video of us singing happy birthday to her some years ago. So, but I'm definitely going to share that on the channel, but always going to love and miss my grandmother. I always say this, when I went into my grandmama's home, it felt like I felt a peace come over me. Every time I went into her house, it always felt like my grandmother's house had a smell. Like it smelled like, it's like my grandma used to wash a lot. I feel like every time I go in there, it smelled like she was washing. Like it smelled like some, she called it washing powder. We call it detergent. She had detergent. She had these little fabrics. She had these fragrances, like these little, she had the little things that shoot out little, the little things you put like a little spray bottle in and they shoot out the little air freshener every few minutes or so. It would always smell good in her house. And every time she washed my clothes, I knew if it came from her house because she used a certain type of fabric softener. She used a certain type of detergent when she washed clothes. So I'm always going to remember that, man. Rest in peace to my grandmother. And I love her dearly. Thank y'all for letting me share this with y'all. Peace.